Chapter 23 Lights in the Dark. Summary. Even if it may seem like the worst situation possible, you might find something you couldn't imagine your life without. Islands was swamped when they arrived. Izuku could see Kacchan rushing around the corner, methodically churning out food in an expert rhythm. He'd really made Island's food stall rocket into popularity since he started working here. If Izuku had to guess, he would say it's in part due to his amazing cooking skills. Like, seriously, forget being a pro hero, he could make it as a chef instead. And partly due to how different human cuisine seemed to be compared to the rest of what sentients had been exposed to. So, the stall was still swamped despite the fact Katsuki would be getting off pretty soon. Mina would meet them here before they left to enjoy the festival all together. So, in the meanwhile, they would just have to wait. Not that they minded having an excuse to eat Katsuki's cooking. As they waited for Kacchan's shift to finish, they chatted with Ayalan, who was manning the front stall. She was truly amazing when it came to multitasking, dividing her attention between the kids and her kitchen expertly. She mentioned a few more places that they needed to check out for the festival, and absolutely raved about the festival's signature treat, the Nebula Cloud. Soon enough, Mina arrived, finished with her performance for the night. It had gone fantastically. The crowd was massive, despite the fact that they were performing on something that barely qualified as a stage in the middle of the street. Everything went smoothly, and Mina was really able to get into her rhythm tonight. The dance group's leader even mentioned that she might want Mina to take more of a spotlight role in an upcoming performance. She couldn't believe it, and talked everyone's ear off until, at last, Katsuki was done with his shift and Ayalan took over. The first thing they did was immediately find the closest stall selling Nebula Clouds and buy some. The outer layer of the thin, airy pastry glowed faintly, backdropped by the deep night sky. The delicate sugary shell sheltered the center, which contained a thick, smooth syrup. The outer layers crumbled easily as Izuku took his first bite, leaving way for the brightly colored inside to almost burst out onto his taste buds. It was sweet, obviously, but in the subtler way that the alien treats they had tried so far were. When it first hit his tongue, Izuku almost thought it tasted like dried strawberries, but the flavor quickly shifted into something closer to a floral honey. It almost tasted like what he would imagine starlight to be like, impossibly light with a silvery warmth. It melted in his mouth as he greedily went back for more. It was amazing. After everyone had had their fair share of the decadent pastries, they continued on throughout the glowing streets. The sun was even closer to dipping beyond the horizon now, and signaling the start of the lantern ceremony. So they didn't have much time left to enjoy the festival. They winded through the crowded streets, checking out all the stalls they could. They made sure to visit all of Ayalan's recommendations. A few of said recommendations were carnival games of sorts. The first they tried was one of those pitcher-type games, where you have to throw a ball as fast as you can at a target and it clocks the speed. It kind of reminded them of the ball throw test from orientation day, so they set up making a contest of it. Denki decided to go first, winding up his throw with way more flair than necessary and letting it fly. It zipped across the stall and struck the target with a thunk. A bright green number in BASIC flashed on the score screen, and after a second, Izuku was able to register what it said. After a few mental calculations, it came up to about 27 meters per second. Not bad considering they were still nowhere near their previous fitness level. Izuku was just about to step up for his turn when he noticed the baffled look on the stall owner's face. How was that so fast? You're so small, he said in utter shock. So this was going to be another Sentients Get Concerned / Weirded Out by the Terrans. The new and improved name instead of the siblings get concerned about the Terran species' well-being. Before Izuku could reluctantly try to explain to the bewildered sentient, Kacchan spoke up. You ain't seen nothing yet, he said with a smug grin. "Your turn, Deku." Just deciding to go with it instead of struggling to explain the oddities of the human race yet again, Izuku wound his arm back and let the ball fly. It rocketed into the target, eliciting a slight crack sound. But the target still stood, as the screen displayed Izuku's speed of 27 meters per second. The stall owner let out a short squeak of shock, but before he could say anything, Katsuki grabbed a ball and wound up his throw. "Die!" he screamed, as he let out a quick, powered blast. The ball shot forward as fast as a bullet, and instead of bouncing off the target, it went straight through. 45 meters per second. While Izuku could tell Kacchan had majorly held back, it was still overkill, especially when the stall owner just stared off into space, slack-jawed. Thankfully, the target appeared to be the only casualty, so after apologizing profusely to the stall owner, they continued on throughout the festival. As the sun was gearing to set, the group decided to stop at one last stall before picking up their lanterns. Unlike the stalls they had been to before in the evening that sold goods and food or housed games, this one was dedicated to a festival tradition. While not all sentients had hair or fur of any type, many did. Most of the original settlers of Oxyus did, in fact, and a tradition had developed. The reasoning and origin lost to time, but it was to put a braid in your fur or hair on the day of the planet settling, and let it fall out naturally over the coming days. So each Terran left the stall with a small braid in their hair. Everyone had chosen to get their braids in different spots. Ochako got hers by her scalp, right beside her forehead. Denki got his braided with his lightning bolt hair pattern. Katsuki had reluctantly gotten one in the middle left side of his head. Mina got one right by her horns, and Mei had got a few dreadlocks braided together at the back of her head. Izuku, on the other hand, had gotten one right at the base of his neck. And he liked it. He liked it a lot. He had originally been planning to wear it like tradition dictated until it fell out, but Izuku really liked it. He looked quite different with his long, slightly unkempt hair. He looked a little more wild, a little more rugged, changed, and experienced. He couldn't quite put it into words, but the look had grown on him. He enjoyed putting his hair up in tandem with Mei when they were ready to work on a repair, or the way it caught in the cool breeze of the forest. In a way, it outwardly showed the change he had been through since their abduction. He wasn't the same. Not quite. The old Izuku didn't have the constant anxiety about being discovered thrumming under his skin. The old Izuku didn't freeze at the simplest sound of hissing air, too much like the paralyzing gas that left him helpless in an instant. The old Izuku didn't feel like crying when he left his friends in the morning sometimes. Okay, maybe he had sometimes, but for different reasons. And the old Izuku didn't trigger a panic attack just thinking about being trapped in a small cage. He wasn't the old Izuku anymore. So, the braid was here to stay. The group fiddled with their braids as they walked around, trying to find a lantern stall. Ochako lamented about her long hair as they searched. "I can't believe I forgot about cutting it. Everything has just been so busy that it must have slipped my mind. But now that I remember it, I can't stop thinking about how I want my hair back," she pouted. I don't know about that," Denki spoke. "I actually like my hair like this. I am totally rocking this ponytail." Kacchan scowled as he picked at his hair. "Fuck that. I can't wait to chop all of this off. I never want to get my hair this long again. I look like my fucking mom." "Oh yeah," Ochako piped back up. "Didn't you say something about wanting to get an undercut?" "That's right," he snorted. "In that case, why don't we both book some hair appointments in town? It'll be nice to just get it over and done with, so I can stop putting it off for work." "Sure, whatever, round face," Katsuki finished as they finally approached a lantern stall. They each picked up a lantern to release, as the most important tradition of the Festival of Lights was the lantern ceremony. Everyone in town gets a lantern, and all at once they release them into the night sky. The balls have thin membranes that will dissolve in the upper atmosphere and are filled with natural glowing gases that harmlessly dilute in the air. The streets begin to clear out as everyone finds a spot to wait for the lantern release. The Terrans and Osiers silently make their way up to a lone hill by the edge of the forest. Spreading out along the pink and green grass, they all stared and waited. The town softly glowed not too far in the distance, the plethora of lights making it a beacon in the dark. But soon, it would go out, and when it did, it would be time. And then it is. Cupping the ball in his bare hands, Zuko watches as the heat-triggered chemical reaction begins. Like witnessing a star being born, a little flicker of light comes together in the middle, before sneaking outwards. Soon the whole ball is glowing with a soft white light, and begins to feel faint on his fingertips. The feeling of weightlessness grows until the lantern is no longer slotted in his palms, but gently floating in the air. Zuko can see the other lanterns begin to float in his peripheries, but his eyes stay locked onto the lone light in the dark sky. As his lantern rises higher, his friends' lanterns float more clearly into view, seemingly drawn together by some invisible force. All the lanterns were supposed to do was glow and float, but that didn't stop them. 8 lights floated alone together in the abyss. Silence blanketed the ground, and they all stood and watched, alone. But, all of a sudden, they could see a light floating up in the distance, followed by another and another. Soon, their lanterns were joined in the sky by thousands of others, each of them released by someone who had attended the festival. The whole world seems to light up now that the sky is full of lanterns. Izuku stares up, enraptured for who knows how long, until he turns his head to the side to glimpse at his friends. Ochako, Mei, Kachan, Denki, Mina, all people he knew back on Earth. Some he would have considered friends, others just classmates or acquaintances. But now they were friends. More than friends. It felt different. They had gone through so much together and would be going through a whole lot more together. And then there were the Osiers, Paripa and Fastel. He didn't even know them a few months ago, but now that he did, if he had to, he wouldn't hesitate to kill for them. He would protect them with his life. They had been through so much and deserved so much better. They were also his friends, or maybe like younger cousins was more accurate. Honestly, that felt a whole lot closer to how he felt. Family. It almost felt right. Friends were too casual, but family? He could see that. Someday. But for now, whatever it was he had, he knew that it was something he couldn't imagine living without.